WKRN TV, Channel 2, your food for family station.
Good evening, I'm Hugh Dow.
And I'm Barbara Walters, and this is 2020.
On the ABC News Magazine, 2020, with Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters. Tonight, from Ireland, a spectacular achievement. This young man suffered an accident at birth, and he's never been able to speak. But when he was 11, something incredible. Christy Nolan started writing.
Well, when I saw those two lines, I knew there was something in Christy.
Today, he's a best-selling author and a playwright. Tonight, how his remarkable talent was unleashed.
It's from his memory. You store it. And then what?
From Bob Brown, a magnificent story. The freeing of Christy Nolan.
2 or 3 eggs, bacon,
Food. Some people are obsessed with it.
a large glass of chocolate milk.
They're called compulsive eaters.
Didn't have anything to do with whether I was hungry or not.
Now, these therapists offer some radical advice. Don't worry. Stop dieting. John Stossel tells of their controversial approach. No fooling. No more diets. Newborn babies, only hours old, stolen from hospital nurseries. This mother says an abductor posed as a nurse.
I turned around and looked at her, and she said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll bring him right back."
It's a growing problem. Yet experts have a profile of the typical abductor. Hugh Downs reports, with another abduction this week, new safeguards are essential. Where's my baby?
And tragically, the horror of a baby being kidnapped is in the news tonight. In Little Rock, Arkansas, there is still no sign of the baby of this woman, Annette Thomas Jones. On Tuesday evening, a woman posing as a nurse said she had to weigh the infant, and the trusting mother handed over her 3-day-old son. Police have a sketch of the suspect. She is 5'4", 135 pounds. This incident is more proof that the abduction of babies is on the rise, and Hugh has been looking into this.
Yes, and Barbara, what we found is that these incidents are definitely on the rise. Now, for example, in the entire decade of the 1960s, we found only one reported case of a baby stolen from a hospital. In 10 years, one case. And here in the 80s, the numbers are climbing. So far in 1988, 7 cases. Now, our hope is that in doing this report and raising awareness, we can prevent a lot of pain.
I'm begging you, please. Bring my son back to me. And I'll be forgiven and forgotten.
Every parent's nightmare, their baby stolen, not from off the street or school, but stolen from the apparent security of the hospital. Last June, High Point Regional Hospital in North Carolina experienced such a nightmare. Hospital Administrator Rick Blake recently retraced the abductor's path with security officers.
We think the abductor probably came up on this set of elevators and probably walked over to this waiting room that sits just beside our postpartum unit.
Police believe the kidnapper spent several hours in the waiting room and then entered Renee McClure's room undetected, dressed as a nurse.
I was going through the bathroom door and turned around and looked at her, and she had picked him up from the bassinet and started to carry him out. And I turned around and looked at her, and she said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll bring him right back."
The High Point kidnapping was one of the 7 reported infant abduction cases that occurred last year. In most cases, the babies were only 1 or 2 days old, taken from their mother's arms, often by abductors posing as nurses. John Rabin of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has been tracking baby abductors for years.
They come in with a lab coat, scrub clothes, nurse's uniform, stethoscope around, I mean, the stereotype, what have you, but it works. I got to take your kid to the lab. Oh, and we hand our kids up. You know, that's incredible.
Since 1983, at least 35 women have kidnapped or tried to take babies from hospitals. Now, there's no thought of ransom in these cases. The intent is to take the child forever. In most cases, the babies are chosen at random whenever opportunity presents itself. The kidnapper has no particular reason for choosing a certain baby and no knowledge of whose baby is taken. In light of the millions of babies born each year, 35 kidnappings is barely a statistical blip. But to the parents of those 35 babies, each kidnapping is an unimaginable nightmare. April 20, 1988, Prescott, Arizona. Douglas Gurwitz, abducted at 4 hours old. July 12, 1988, Huntington, West Virginia. 1 day old Lindsay Manns was the second baby the abductor tried to take that day. August 2, 1988, St. Louis, Missouri. 2-day-old Gregory Mason was snatched from the nursery. And on June 20, 1988, in circumstances common to almost all of these cases, 1-day-old Jason McClure was smuggled out of a hospital in High Point, North Carolina, by a woman posing as a nurse.
Everybody was crying and screaming and not believing. I kept saying to myself, this is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up, and Jason's going to be right here beside of me, and I'm going to feel really funny because I dreamed something so horrible.
The McClures put off for 2 days telling their son Kevin his little brother was missing.
I feel like he knew something was wrong the whole time. But he was crying, and he told me, he said, I want to see my baby now, Mama. And no sooner he got that out of his mouth is when they come around the corner with Jason.
Easy then. Police, acting on a tip from a neighbor, found Jason with 37-year-old Brenda Nobles, a woman who years before had a hysterectomy. Nobles is still undergoing psychiatric examination pending her trial on charges of kidnapping. What kind of a person would kidnap an infant? Well, from the cases, patterns emerge. The abductors are almost always women, often unable to bear a child, and sometimes having had a recent miscarriage. For the most part, kidnappers have had no prior criminal record, but they're under stress and are emotionally unstable, often desperately trying to hold on to the man in their life. The case of 21-year-old Cheryl Staley is typical. In September, Staley was convicted of kidnapping Lachey Cherry. She had discovered her pregnancy test results were negative after she had told her excited boyfriend he was becoming a father. Unwilling to disappoint him, she faked a pregnancy.
I was wearing maternity clothes. They gave me a shower on the job. It was supposedly to be a surprise. I had heard about it, and then at this point, it got to be I couldn't disappoint these people.
On April 23, 1988, Staley went to Philadelphia's Children's Hospital. Mistaken by hospital staff as the baby's aunt, Staley took Lachey Cherry home with her. John Rabin believes understanding the kidnappers might be the key to prevention.
This isn't a dangerous person. This is Mama. This woman believes that she is Mama for that baby.
48 hours after news reports of the kidnapping, Cheryl Staley was arrested. Suspicious family and neighbors tipped the police.
When they arrested me and they took her, that's when, to me, I began to understand the way that her mother felt. Because when she was kidnapped, the mother must have felt a great loss.
Although most babies are recovered within a matter of days, as in the case we just showed you, for families like the Tates, the nightmare dragged on for months. What had begun as the happiness of birth quickly became the horror of kidnapping. Jeremiah Tate was born May 22, 1987, after a difficult pregnancy. Terry Tate risked her life to have her son. 3 weeks later, while re-hospitalized for pneumonia, Jeremiah was smuggled out of Maryland's Prince George's Hospital in a gym bag. His parents left the pediatric ward for half an hour. When they came back, Jeremiah was gone. Rob Tate was immediately suspicious.
But it just didn't feel right. And, started to get that uneasy feeling in my stomach.
Terry, what was your first reaction?
We went to the nurse's station, and our nurse, Tina, was there. And I said, real jerky, I said, well, where's Jeremiah? And she goes, what? And when she looked at me then, I knew something was wrong. I said, he's not in there, and his IV's cut. And then everything just broke. I mean, everybody was everywhere.
Unlike most kidnappings, Jeremiah wasn't recovered within a few days. As leads dried up, days became weeks, and weeks became months. In desperation, Jeremiah's parents turned to the media, doing 7 to 8 interviews a day.
Please release our son before it gets worse. We want him back. We love him.
Jeremiah was missing for exactly 4 months when Washington, D.C. fireman Don Durner read a newspaper article about the missing baby. That very same night, he responded to a fire in southeast Washington.
I stepped back outside in front of the building, and then I noticed these 2 black women standing out under a streetlight at the curb with this very unmistakable white baby in their arms.
Durner called the police, and Jeremiah was once again back in his parents' arms.
He looks just like our daughter. Just exactly. You knew it. As soon as we saw him, the police had told they knew it was our baby because he looked just like his mommy.
Linda Faye Stansel was charged with Jeremiah's kidnapping. Like many of the other abductors, she had recently suffered a miscarriage and hoped a baby would strengthen her relationship with her boyfriend. Last June, she was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in prison, a sentence she is currently appealing. In response to the McClure kidnapping, High Point Regional Hospital has tightened its security.
Okay, be sure that whenever anyone comes to pick up your baby or a nurse enters the room to talk with you, to do anything for you, she has on a hospital name tag, like this. And we do have
5 or 10 years ago, a hospital wouldn't have thought to warn parents about abductions. But increasingly, they're realizing parents are the first line of defense.
If you're going to go to sleep, or if you're going to go to the bathroom, or if you're going to somehow be distracted for anything other than the minimal short amount of time, whoa, somebody's got to be in line of sight control.
To improve that line of sight control, hospitals are beefing up traditional security measures, the kind we are used to seeing in department stores, guards, video cameras, and now a new device, a computerized system which can track a baby's movements throughout the hospital. If the security system fails and the baby is taken, footprints and blood samples become crucial for identification. But most states don't require prints to be made or blood to be saved, leaving it up to the individual hospital. Now, while blood and prints can identify a baby positively once it's found, if the months drag on, a newborn's appearance changes, and police turn to artists for help. 2020 asked Scott Barrow to work from a photo of Carlina White, who was only 19 days old when she was taken from New York's Harlem Hospital. Over 14 months later, the FBI has no leads, and officials are hoping when this picture is distributed nationally, someone will recognize Carlina. Well, now that the Tate's nightmare is over, 17-month-old Jeremiah shows little sign of his ordeal. But Rob and Terry will never forget the afternoon they left Jeremiah alone in his hospital crib.
Never leave your baby alone. Never. Don't feel funny about asking questions. Ask them. It's your child that's, at risk.
From her prison cell in Philadelphia, Cheryl Staley agrees.
I wish that someone would have stopped me or asked me some questions. I didn't mean at all to harm her in any way. I just wanted the baby to love.
I can think of a few things more hideous than having your baby stolen.
Ghastly nightmare.
It's so interesting because we do automatically trust the hospital, and you automatically trust anyone who comes in. And now it just means that mothers are going to have to take responsibility themselves, aren't they?
The bottom line is keep an eye on what you treasure most, and that has to be done. And hospitals are beginning to be aware of the need to beef up security, too.
Thank you, Hugh. And again, regarding the kidnapped baby in Arkansas, this is the suspect police are looking for. The baby boy was born 6 weeks premature, weighs about 4 pounds, and is considered medically fragile. Maybe someone watching can help bring this baby home. Well, later in the hour, temptation becomes a solution. For compulsive eaters, advice that they should stock up on their favorite foods. John Stossel reports, no more diets. But next, guaranteed one of the most remarkable stories you will ever see. Bob Brown with the freeing of Christy Nolan.
If I sold you something that wasn't truly what you needed, you'd find me out, you wouldn't trust me, and you'd never do business with me again. That's absolutely counter to the kind of relationship I want to have with you. Our goal is to not just sell you one thing and leave and never come back again. Our goal is that we have an ongoing relationship, that you buy from us today and in the future, and it isn't a one-shot deal. And that, I think, is how people throughout the company feel.
Nissan has developed a new high-performance sports car with a modified Z-Car engine, anti-sway bars front and rear, and anti-lock brakes. The cockpit was designed for one 6'2" driver and 4 6'2" passengers. Introducing the new Nissan Maxima, the 4-door sports car.
The new Remington Microscreen Ultimate with the exclusive beard lifter stretches the skin and lifts whiskers other shavers leave behind. The new Remington Microscreen Ultimate shaves as close to the blade and closer than any other electric shaver, or your money back.
For generations, it's nourished grandparents, grandchildren, and now their children's children. The breakfast Europeans have enjoyed for centuries. Known in America as Kellogg's Mueslix, a natural balance of oats, wheat, rice, corn, barley, raisins, dates, and hazelnuts. Kellogg's Mueslix, 5 grain or bran, what breakfast was meant to be.
The Duracell batteries we make now live longer than the ones from a few years back. Today's Duracell lasts up to 30% longer.
Sunday. Stop a foreign dictator who supplies drugs to America. An all-new Mission Impossible. Then, what happens when a dirty bum meets the filthy rich? Nick Nolte, Richard Dreyfuss, and Bette Midler are all down and out in Beverly Hills.
Imagine that for the first half of your life, this was your life. You had a gift for seeing beauty no one else could see. You found poetry in ordinary events. You relished your sense of sight, your sense of touch. Yours were remarkable talents, but the world would never know, because you could neither speak nor write. Then a seeming miracle, the freeing of your mind through a typewriter, and a first book published at age 15, a second at 21, and this year, headlines when you received Britain's highest literary award. There's really been a story like the freeing of Christy Nolan, and no one could tell it better than Bob Brown.
In Dublin, on a busy street, you may see his photo in a store window. At the age of 23, Christopher Nolan is one of Ireland's best-known writers and poets, and one of the few writers in history ever to communicate from a body so hopelessly crippled.
My body rarely stops moving. My arms wage constant battle trying to make me look a fool. My smile, which can be most natural, can at times freeze, thereby making me seem sad and uninterested. 2 great legs I may have, but put my body weight on them and they collapse under me like a house of cards.
Nolan was asphyxiated at birth during a difficult delivery. He is spastic with cerebral palsy and mute. Because he can't speak, Christopher Nolan's words were read for us by an actor, from his books, his poems, and from written answers to questions that we'd submitted. But in every other respect, he is a forceful and communicative man who had no trouble at all conveying his humor, his impatience, his imagination, his intellect, his concern as we followed his life. He was 11 years old before he was able to type his first word, but his mind had been capturing everything. He authored 2 books by the time he was 21, a day he described for us by way of introduction to the outlook that is also part of his gift.
Birthdays are but green leaves on the tree of life, and on reaching 21, a fellow must stop and stare. I chose the early dawn hours to be alone with my thoughts and with my Creator. I sat looking out across the Irish Sea towards the dark horizon, It resembled the darkness inside the womb, and loneliness is dark and dank. But as I quietly watched, I saw something silver illuminate the sea. It drew itself up out of the waters, lighting up the sky. The gold deepened into red, and suddenly there it was, the new sun, shining up over the horizon and lighting up my world, and lighting up the dawn of my 21st year of glorious life.
The man who wrote those words was once a boy who might never have been able to express them had it not also been for the family that helped bring him to that dawn.
You knew Christy was intelligent long before he ever wrote anything.
We all knew that he was very, very intelligent, very intelligent.
Christy's ability to communicate began when he learned as an infant to raise his eyes to indicate yes to his mother Bernadette.
It started off with you know, when I would be feeding him. Do you want any more? Look up if you wanted for yes, or, you know, the shake of his head for no. Now that would be, say he was 8 months, 9 months old. And then that look up developed into a whole lot of different meanings. It could mean, as he developed through his life, it meant God. You become so tuned in that, you know, that you think just as quick as him.
Christy, a good day of writing would be 8 hours, 12 hours of work?
You were right, you were right, you were right, he said. Which, the 8? The 12? The 12.
Is it fair to say that it's something that you have to do? Not necessarily a question of a kind of motivation, but something that you absolutely have to do?
No, he said, there is nothing else I can do. He's showing you his condition. There is nothing else I can do.
His mother it was who treated him as normal, tumbled to his intelligence, tumbled to his eye-signaled talk, tumbled to the holly berries, green yet, but holding promise of burning in red, given time, given home.
His early childhood, with his parents and his older sister Yvonne, was spent on this family farm west of Dublin. No one yet knew that he could frame words into powerful sentences because he was too spastic to even point to numbers or letters. But there were magical elements at work. His love of poetry grew from hearing his father recite rhymes in a warm Irish country accent.
No sound there is on the snowy road from the horse's heavy feet. All is hushed but the postman's knock rat-tatting down the street, until the men come round with shovels to clear the snow away. What a pity it is when it comes, they never let it stay. I just said those poems for Christy as a child, the same as you'd sing for a baby to get him to sleep.
One rhyme in particular seemed to mark the day that Christy became a poet, as he later recalled in a passage about his father's fireside recitals.
And so the boy listened as his father created the image of a donkey. One day old, his head was too big for his neck to hold. His legs were shaky and long and loose. They rocked and staggered and weren't much use. He formed the image of the little wobbly donkey in his mind. He looked at his own limbs. His head lolled back. The stirring of the muse took root that day.
Look at the height of that pitbull. See that?
Most importantly, Christy's family treated him as if everything was within his grasp, from abstract ideas to the cold touch of stones from a nearby stream.
Just watch, Johnny. See where the fire had reached in that stone, where the picnic fire long ago. He never feels left out of it. What he can't actually go in and get himself, we bring it to him. And we always have. Never ever thinking he was going to write or was going to be that useful to him, but it was just sort of an ordinary procedure if he couldn't get it when we brought it to him.
They took turns wheeling their only boy all around the farm. The chariot often bumped against a hillock, heeling over and tossing the rider out on top of his head. Weary but never defeated by fate, they brought their disabled child with them everywhere they went.
Country life ended when Christy was 7. The Nolans uprooted themselves and moved to the city, to Dublin, where Christy could have a better chance at an education. Here, within a few blocks of their new home, was the Central Remedial Clinic, a special school for the handicapped. But for 4 more years, no one could discover a means of releasing the intellect that was growing like a giant within his crippled body. The breakthrough came when Christy was 11 years old. Early efforts to see if he could use a typewriter to gain the voice he never had didn't work because of his muscle spasms. But here in Dublin, he was given a new drug called Lioresal, and it allowed his muscles to relax just enough so that with his mother cradling his chin in her hands and a pointer attached to his forehead, he could bow and use the pointer to select the typewriter keys one by one. With his mother's hands sensing the urgency in his nods, Christy's first poems began dropping onto his pages, one letter at a time. One of his first works, titled I Peer Through Ugliness, is still his mother's favorite.
It was the very last 2 lines of the poem. Day after dawn,
Raw quiet rested there, as I peered through rough pastures. Dewdrops glistened in golden buttercups.
And Bob, when I saw those 2 lines, I knew there was something in Christy and that it was special and that it was worth waiting for.
Christy had had more than enough of waiting. He wanted to go to a school for ordinary children. And despite the overwhelming odds against that, his parents made the applications. It was a small miracle when Dublin's prestigious Mount Temple Comprehensive School agreed to take Christy at the age of 13. The headmaster, John Medlicott, recalled the electricity of the moment when Christy learned he had been accepted.
When eventually I got round to sort of saying to him, well, Christy, when are you ready to start? All I remember was the whole room sort of turning upside down, because it's the first time ever a pupil actually wanted to come right towards me. I mean, I'd never had this experience before. The whole chair, him, everything started moving towards me, and to say a sort of thank you.
It was the beginning of a period of learning, of science and literature and friendship that Christy would later describe in his prize-winning book about his life, titled For a School Landmark, Under the Eye of the Clock. He went on to study for a year at Dublin's Trinity College, and there he was taught and befriended by one of Ireland's best-known living poets, Brendan Kennelly.
He is unconsciously a teacher, and what he teaches is appreciation. If you notice his eyes, they are always relishing what is in front of him. If he's going up to Bewley's, it's a famous Dublin cafe. He's thinking of tea and buns, and he relishes that. Now, when I'm hungry, I just want to, cut through the crowds. I want to get in there, sit out my coffee and my bun, and that's that. My hunger is satisfied. I get back to work. And it's all done. The curious thing about haste is that you tend not to experience anything fully. You have experienced everything. I think that actually, in Christy's case, the slowing up necessitated by his affliction has, in a strange way, been his inspiration.
Christy, when you write, do you see the images strongly in your mind? Yes.
It's from his memory. You store it, and then what? It's almost like a camera. It's almost as if he had a camera, and he stores it.
Those powers of observation are so acute that Christy is able to perfectly reconstruct a scene long after others have forgotten it. On a summer afternoon, the Nolans, with Christy and his sister, took us on a picnic in the country to show us a place where Christy had once seen a house with a blue door, an old man, a restless young dog. Years later, that brief encounter suddenly appeared in a poem from a day that no one but Christy had given much thought to.
We arrived and we set out our picnic, and we were sitting there for a while when this old man came, and he told us that his dog was breaking loose on him, and would we help him to get the dog.
Be careful not to scare him, whispered my dad, real low. Otherwise we'll never catch him, and then what will the old man do? My hand made a spiteful flail. Turning back as if chastised, the dog gave a shrill yelp. Bursting through heather and bracken, he meandered, gasping for help.
And then we went on with our picnic, and we forgot all about that. But Christy started to write here one day. And it was only then that you realised that he had been capturing everything that was happening.
Then together the two paraded, the man with the dog at heel, talking the talk of comrades, testing the mettle of each. On towards the blue-painted cabin, its half-door welcoming through a sad, lonely figure of manhood, and health brimming over in youth.
Here we go. Now wait for it.
As surely as Christy's memory supplied him with images to place on paper, this year, in his way, he helped find a voice to carry his words to an audience.
Playing then, is playing now. Mobile motionless ladder.
In midsummer 1988, inside one of Ireland's oldest vaudeville theaters, the Gaiety, Christy attended the first rehearsals of a play written by him and based on his books.
We need the absolute panic there of the delivery room, don't we?
He collaborated with the director, Michael Scott, and on this day with actor Connor Mullen, who will speak Christy's lines. They were going over variations of the words and sounds that Christy has always heard in his head, but has never spoken aloud.
Musa Molag. Musa. It's the mu. M-U. Mu. Musa.
Oh, geez, how am I going to do this?
Think of it, as he thought for years before people knew what was in his mind, and now it is happening. The Dublin street musicians in front of the Gaiety are there for opening night, October 6th, 1988. And from a simple childhood rhyme about a wobbling donkey that stirred his first poetic image of himself, Christopher Nolan has come to meet us all on his own terms.
School days were sweetened by sugar stick face.
Looking strikingly like Christy, Connor Mullen plays the young crippled boy who has finally made it to a school for ordinary children. He is worried about rejection. His arms are flailing.
Jamie, I'm in luck. He mused as he caught the eye of the boy at the next desk. The boy...
Nevertheless, his eyes break through to another youth. To him, a new world of contact, a promise of friendship.
He smiled again. How are you? I'm Paul Brown. I'm none of your set in this class. Don't worry about being on your own. I'll be beside you, and I'll look after you. Joseph nearly exploded with delight. I've cracked it! I've bloody well cracked it!
In a sense, Christopher Nolan has given birth to himself in a way most able-bodied people can only dream of. If he speaks for others like him, and he hopes he does, it's in a simple challenge he once wrote.
Leaning on his family, he cast down the gauntlet. Accept me for what I am, and I'll accept you for what you're accepted as.
What a powerful portrait. You know, when you watch it and realize what it reveals about the human spirit, did you have trouble understanding him? His mother seems to have no difficulty reading what he's trying to express. Did you get the hang of it?
That's a good question. I got it a lot faster than I thought I would. At first, you're a little self-conscious when you meet him, but immediately he starts to get your attention with his eye signals, with what body gestures he can make, and with what I can only describe as a kind of a telepathic way of communicating with you, because he wants your attention. If he has a message, it's pay attention, not only to me, but to other disabled people. Give them credit for receiving things that you might not even know about.
How triumphant he must feel now to be able to get those words down on paper. Thank you, Bob.
Next, what happens when food takes over your life? And is it possible that to get control, you should buy more of what you crave the most? John Stossel with a new idea for compulsive eaters. No more diets.
Strange how many automobiles portrayed as state-of-the-art have become mere illusions of innovation. Enter the Acura Legend Coupe, named one of the 10 best cars in the world by both Car and Driver and Road and Track magazines. It is shattering preconceived ideas of what a performance automobile should be. The Legend Coupe, precision-crafted performance from Acura.
Xerox fax machines not only send your document, but let you know it got there and guarantee delivery. And you thought we only made great copiers. Team Xerox. We document the world.
America loves Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon, but the imported varietal America loves most is Lambrusco Riuniti. The rich fruit of the red, the pure joy of the white. Riuniti, America's best-loved imported premium wine.
It's a little fresh country. It's Glade potpourri in the spray. It's country wildflowers with a little bit of garden fruit inside.
Introducing Glade potpourri in a spray.
It's a little fresh country.
Glade captures potpourri in a spray, so you can enjoy the fragrances of fresh garden blossoms, spices, and fruits for any room in your home, anytime, instantly.
New Glade potpourri spray. It's a little fresh country.
I don't know too many businesses that can afford not to be competitive, whatever size you are. That's why I'm here, and why we have a service like Prime. It's as simple as regular long distance with itemized call detail and a 15% discount, and that can really benefit a lot of growing businesses. Listen, we know what it's like to go up against a giant. I like to believe I can help my customers go up against their giant, too.
Until you call, you'll never know how much better a long-distance company can be. MCI, let us show you.
Food. For some people, it controls their lives. All day, every day. But could this be a solution? Stocking up on favorite foods. John Stossel explains. No more diet. When 2020 continues.
Peter Jennings and David Brinkley will lead the best political team in the business election night. Donaldson, Greenfield, Hume, Seraphim, Scher, Simpson, Will, Wooten. From the ABC News Election Command Center, the 88 vote, Jennings and Brinkley. Can you imagine election night without them?
At just 49 cents each, our original taco can satisfy the biggest appetite. Taco Bell has the road to make a ride.
There's always something presiding on Night Court.
You will not believe what just happened to me.
Some loose woman that you've never met before has agreed to go back to your place and participate in some deviant sexual behavior.
What gave me away, the drool? The verdict is in, and we're guilty of laughs. Weekdays at 4:30 on Night Court.
Good evening, I'm Davis Nolan with a weather update. The tornado watch has now expired. No more tornado watches in effect for our area. The strong thunderstorm swept across Middle Tennessee earlier this evening, downing power lines and trees, and there still are some power outages in some spots. It does look like, though, we still have a few more showers to come in from the northwest, and some cooler temperatures as well for your weekend weather. We've got all the information on all the damage that took place in Middle Tennessee and northern Alabama, as well as the weekend weather outlook tonight on Channel 2 News.
I want a better mix of music.
Try Nashville's new W Mix, 96.3 FM. The best mix of the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Something fun's happening here weeknights at 6:30. It's Family Feud, and the survey says you're going to love it. Catch the feud here on WKRN Channel 2.
For most of us, food is nourishment and food is pleasure. Not always in that order. But for some people, food is what they can't stop thinking about. They're obsessed by it. Obviously, these people risk being overweight. But what's less clear is what to do about it. Because how can you diet if you're obsessed with food? Well, tonight, John Stossel tells us of a controversial solution to this obsession problem. Stop dieting.
It's nighttime. You're all alone with your refrigerator.
Many people find this ad hilarious, but to compulsive eaters, it's too real to be funny. It's no joke to Vanessa Ayers Alexi. For 20 years now, Vanessa's been obsessed with food.
I'd like a veal Parmesan hero, please.
Veal Parmesan hero. She leads a busy life in New York City. She's married, she has a job, she's also trying to develop a career as an opera singer. Yet despite her obvious talent and command of the rest of her life, Vanessa is out of control when it comes to food.
One of my very worst binges
I made a half a dozen dinner rolls. I calmly made a stack of 4 plate-sized pancakes, 2 or 3 eggs, bacon, a large glass of chocolate milk. To be healthy, I had orange juice, I think. And I finished it.
And how did you feel then?
I feel horrible. This thing that sat on a plate that did not talk took over.
That's the problem. For compulsive eaters, food takes over. They think about food all the time. A simple spread of food can generate terrible anxiety because they fear they'll start eating and never stop. Psychotherapists Carol Munter and Jane Hirschman treat compulsive eaters.
What we address is the obsession that people have. It's like a bad radio program that's playing all day long in the back of your head. It's this constant buzz from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep.
The first thing when I open my eyes, food. What should I eat? What should I not eat?
Why can't they stop thinking about food?
There's a feeling, a situation, something that's sparking anxiety. And instead of thinking about their difficulties and naming them, they reach for food.
Food means love. It's a friend, a long-lost friend that, has been with you and doesn't talk back to you, doesn't say you're bad. It soothes you, and it's almost an instant high.
Followed by a low.
Immediately afterward, what would you say to yourself?
You're nothing. You're nothing. Look at you. You dumb, stupid person. Yes, you sung on major stages. You sung at New York City Opera. But because you're overweight, it means nothing.
These feelings of self-contempt are typical. Compulsive eaters often feel like failures because of their lack of control. And usually when they go for help, the first thing they're told is, just go on a diet. But Vanessa, like so many compulsive eaters, has already been on just about every conceivable diet. A Brussels sprouts diet, the Scarsdale diet.
I've been on Weight Watchers, God, I can't remember how many times.
And she was successful at many of these diets. One time she dieted for a year and lost 100 pounds. To others, it seemed her compulsive eating problem was over. But in fact, even thin people can have this problem.
You still were thinking about food all the time?
Constantly. I was hanging on by bloody fingernails.
Eventually, she started binging again and gained all the weight back, plus 15 pounds.
It's just such a sad, sad life.
Can anything help end the turmoil? Well, there's no agreement on treatment, though most experts recommend some form of diet. But psychotherapists Munter and Hirschman say their 18 years treating compulsive eaters has led them to a radically different approach. This year, they published a controversial book outlining their method. It involves a series of steps, the first of which is a surprise. Stop dieting, they say, because diets don't work.
Most people who go on diets and lose weight regain the weight.
That seems incredible considering our diet mania, but scientific research bears her out. In fact, studies have shown that repetitive or yo-yo dieting can actually make you gain weight. For instance, high school wrestlers were studied by researchers from the University of Pennsylvania. That's because they often diet like crazy to qualify for a lower weight class and then gain the weight back between meets. The study found that the more often the wrestlers' weights went up and down, the more likely they were to get fat during the off-season, and the harder it was for them to take the weight off on the next diet. Why? The researchers theorized that repeated dieting causes your metabolism to slow down to protect you against starvation. It's as if your cells say to each other, hey, he's trying to kill us. Let's slow down so we don't starve. And they do. Munter and Hirschman say there are also psychological reasons diets don't work. What they've seen in hundreds of compulsive eaters they've treated is that the deprivation of dieting sets people up to overeat.
What people do when they go on diets is they're putting themselves in a cage. And what they eventually do is break out. They don't run to the lettuce and the cottage cheese when they stop their diet. They run to all the forbidden goodies.
In order to stop that part of the cycle, Munter and Hirschman tell compulsive eaters, legalize all food. That means they can eat whatever they want. Furthermore, they tell people, fill your kitchen with a surplus of the foods you love and therefore fear the most. Doesn't matter what it is. If you love potato chips, but you're afraid you'll eat the whole bag when you get home, that's okay. 5, 10 bags. If you're afraid you'll eat an entire carton of ice cream when you get home, then buy
6 cartons. Now, isn't this dangerous? Why do you tell them to put these enormous quantities of food in their house?
So they can relax. They don't ever have to worry that they're going to be deprived again.
Won't some people just eat and weigh 300 pounds?
No. When you say, I'm not going to deprive myself of food anymore, you don't have the same craving, so you end up eating much less.
Really? Well, for a few months now, Vanessa's been trying this approach. She stopped dieting and stocked her house. How's it working?
This is the ultimate in Twinkies, chocolate cupcakes, chocolate donuts, Oreo cookies. These are all the forbidden foods, which are now okay to have in the house?
Yeah.
Did you worry that you would just sit down and eat it all?
Yeah. The first time I bought this cake, I sat down in almost one sitting and ate the cake. At first it crossed my mind, don't get another one. You better not do that. That's demon. But I went out and I bought another cake, and you see I've taken several slices, but that's been there for like 3 weeks. I don't want any more.
Because you can have it.
Because I can have it.
This is just crazy, say many diet experts, such as Dr. Kelly Brownell of the University of Pennsylvania.
If you do what they're telling Vanessa to do to a laboratory animal, you get more eating, you get a worse diet, and you get obesity.
Scientists have done studies that show that when rats are given unlimited access to nutritional food and junk food like cheese curls and marshmallows, they often gorge themselves on the junk food and triple their weight. Do people respond like rats? Brownell thinks they might, and therefore says Vanessa shouldn't give up on dieting.
Why not try harder? One more diet. And one more might do it.
No. You know, I don't want to waste another day of waiting for my life to begin till after another diet.
Wasting her life is what Ann Rodman says she's stopped doing, thanks to the Munter-Hirschman technique. She owns a dress shop in upstate New York. She gave up on diets 5 years ago, and though she has not lost weight, Ann says she's cured. Her weight is stable at 150 pounds, and she's no longer a compulsive eater.
What's changed?
Never being afraid of food. That's the biggest thing for me, that I'm not scared of it anymore.
At home, the refrigerator is full of things.
Like ice cream.
4 tubs.
Sure.
In the old days, Ann sometimes ate nearly half a gallon in one sitting.
So this is no longer a threat, having all this ice cream.
No problem.
No problem, because Ann now eats on demand.
I would like to have cheese onion roll.
Demand feeding is the principal idea behind the Munter-Hirschman approach. It means you eat whenever you're hungry, but only when you're hungry. Sounds easy.
It's not that easy. I used to always eat when food was around. Didn't have anything to do with whether I was hungry or not. So you have to find out if you're hungry. And then you have to decide when you're ready to stop.
I mean, to just eat when you're hungry and eat until you're full, that's what I do. What's difficult about it?
It was hard for me.
It's hard for compulsive eaters because they've gotten out of touch with their body's signals. They're so anxious about food, they don't know when they're hungry or when they're full.
When the infant gets hungry, she screams, her face gets red, her arms and legs go. And when the mother comes along and feeds her, she calms down. That is really what we're having compulsive eaters do. They are directly meeting their needs. They feel very secure and calm, and then they can begin to name their difficulties rather than eat about them.
Vanessa is still struggling to read her body's signals, but she's making progress. For the first time, she's able to eat at Wilson's, her neighborhood restaurant.
Thank you.
The idea of ordering a meal here used to terrify her because they serve the soul food she loves most.
And you were afraid you would just eat and not stop.
If I ordered what I really wanted, it'd be obscene.
These days, Vanessa no longer eats obscene amounts of food, yet still she sometimes overeats. And in the 4 months since she began the program, she's gained a few pounds.
Does it make you nervous that you've put on those few pounds?
It makes me very nervous.
Munter and Hirschman say gaining weight is not unusual at the start of their program because it takes time to undo a compulsive eater's warped relationship with food. But they argue that the weight gain won't continue.
Once I'm using food as a fuel rather than as a tranquilizer, then my body is going to return to what for me is a natural weight.
Natural weight is a key concept in this approach.
Munter and Hirschman argue that if you eat only when you're really hungry, you'll arrive at your natural weight. That could be heavy or thin or somewhere in between. But you must learn to accept this weight in order to stop the out-of-control eating. In a society that glorifies thinness, perhaps this idea is the hardest to accept.
People come in various shapes and sizes. A lot has to do with genetics, metabolism, age, energy levels, and to think that the American population can all diet down to be the same size is ludicrous.
Anne says learning to accept her body size really helped. When she was on the diet binge roller coaster, no matter what her weight, she always felt bad about her body.
How'd you dress back then?
Polyester pull pants, shirts always pulled out, just anything to disguise what my body looked like, because I thought it looked so horrible.
Something to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Anne hides no more. Now she has a big selection of colorful, fashionable clothes.
I would never have bought fuchsia before.
Because?
Well, because it would show off my bulk, would make me look fatter.
You weigh just as much now as you did then.
That's right. It's all attitude. I just feel better.
But isn't it unhealthy for a 5'2" woman to weigh 150 pounds?
Overweight people as a group have excess risk for many serious diseases, particularly cardiovascular disease. With Anne, for example, how do we know that we're not taking 5, 6, 10 years off her life by living with these extra pounds?
We are very, very concerned that the American population live long, healthy lives. And if we thought that by dieting you could do that, we would be for dieting.
You think you're going to succeed with this approach? It's going to work for you?
You know, it's a day at a time. I don't know what size my body really is. It might be heavier. It might be thinner. It might be just what it is. I'm just going to have to accept who Vanessa is right now and do the best I can.
That's very interesting, John, the business of accepting it if you are heavy and not always trying to diet and be thin. How controversial is this whole technique?
Very. Many doctors say you should keep trying to diet. But these therapists have a good point in that some good studies show that 90% of the time diets fail. So if you're going to fail, why torture yourself? Why put your whole life on hold and keep feeling like a failure? Accept your weight.
How do you know if you're a compulsive eater? I mean, I get up every morning. The first thing I think about is having breakfast, I guess.
Well, you may be a compulsive eater. It's many thin people are. But you think about food all the time.
No. What you say, if you're obsessed, huh?
If you think about it, if you put your life on hold because you think about food all the time.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Well, next, it was David versus Goliath, and David won. We'll have the details right after this.
Introducing an automobile that will change the way you think about two-seaters. Riata by Buick, the premium American two-seater you can be comfortable with. Riata offers a high level of luxury, sophisticated conveniences, and a remarkable amount of room at a most attractive price. If your aim in life has always been high, drive the premium American two-seater. Riata by Buick. Go ahead. You deserve it. You know, the problem may not be your phone, but your long-distance phone company. Switch to Sprint. Get the best sound quality and save as much as 10, 20, even 30%.
If I were a carpet, I might look pretty much like other carpets. I'd be colorful, rich-looking. I'd talk about stains and wear and tear. So how would you be sure I was built to stay this good-looking? Look for this, because there's only one genuine, authentic, unduplicated, DuPont-certified stain master carpet. And a lot of others trying to get by on appearances.
It's not a Stainmaster carpet if it doesn't say DuPont.
Kids like cartoon vitamins that taste good. You want them to take a multivitamin you think is good for them. Presenting Sunkist multivitamins for children. The essential vitamins kids need.
I like that Sunkist for kids.
Sunkist multivitamins for children.
Don't take chances with your brake repairs.
Trust your brakes to Midas, where the work is done by trained experts. And your brake shoes and pads are guaranteed for as long as you own your car. Nobody beats Midas. Nobody.
Saturday. Mike Connors explores history's most horrible crimes.
Somebody came in and assassinated a child.
Crimes of the century. Then Robert Conrad is a framed cop.
Murder in the first degree.
He's dead. I'm coming after you. Police Story. Saturday.
Halloween this past Monday. The year-end holidays coming up. It's a big season for the makers of greeting cards. But last year, our report, Card Wars, told a story about greeting card makers that surprised a lot of people. Stephen and Susan Schutz created a line of alternative greeting cards that gave their company, Blue Mountain Arts, a niche in the industry. Maybe too big a niche, because what they told John Stossel was that Hallmark, America's largest card maker, had started copying their work. Susan made the discovery while shopping one day.
And I turned them over, and it said Hallmark on it.
Susan came running out of the store crying, and I couldn't get, she couldn't tell me what was wrong. She was just hysterical.
So you thought they were your cards?
The graphics in the poem, it looked exactly like ours. Every detail, it was just incredible.
The couple filed suit. There was a long legal battle, and just last week, Hallmark agreed to pull its similar line of cards off the market. There is also an undisclosed financial settlement. And now let's see what Ted Koppel has for us on tonight's Nightline. Ted?
Barbara, in all the noise and bombast of this presidential campaign, what seems to have been lost is serious attention to the issues. For anyone who's confused on where the candidates stand, we'll have a fill-in tonight. Hugh?
That's Nightline after your local news. And that is 2020 for tonight. We thank you for joining us.
And remember that we're in touch, so you be in touch. I'm Barbara Walters.
And I'm Hugh Dow.
And for all of us here at 2020, good night.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, trained technical support folks are watching every one of the long-distance switches in the country. There's no slack. There's no time when they're saying, well, I guess I won't get long-distance service today, or days when they say, oh, I guess this long-distance data service is not going to work, or I guess I can't have the computer in L.A. talk to the computer in New York tonight because AT&T's having a bad day. Downtime is not acceptable. You can't have bad days. You just can't do that in this company.
My palms used to sweat when I had to get on the highway. Now with my Camry V6, I just punch. Yeah! Punch it, Margaret! I love it.
The 1989 Toyota Camry V6. 24 valves, 153 horsepower to please even the toughest customers.
We just fell in love with life in the fast lane.
My Toyota, what could ask for anything more?
It was scary. It was scary. We had no idea what the Germans had left. You know, they had big, huge pillboxes and big guns on the beach at Omaha and Red Beach, but we never knew what they were going to come up with next. Nobody knew what was going to happen. It was a hit and miss game at that particular time.
3 teenagers are lucky to have only bruises after a bout with tonight's thunderstorms. The weather also dampens the playoff picture for high school football teams. And in our Whether or Not segment, Pepsi receives an endorsement of sorts, or should we say snorts. Good evening, I'm Ann Holt. Those stories and more news next on Channel 2 News.
This is 2020. This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
This is ABC.